There's something called the Osiris Shaft, which is located directly under the causeway between the Sphinx and the second pyramid. And it goes about 100 feet underground. It's carved out of the limestone bedrock. It's the creepiest place I've ever been in my life. It's disturbing.
Why is it disturbing?
I don't know, Joe. Well, there's human bones in there. I stepped on. I didn't even know.
What?
Yeah.
How old are the bones?
Well, not sure. Like, not super ancient. Like something like people in more modern times, maybe 100 years ago, fell down there or something. But, and I got to go in there, but.
This is the truth about what happened in Egypt. Believe it or not, Egyptians had access to way more than we do, which is how they were able to make pyramids and always wore gold. They even stored a lot of this technology inside the pyramids for us to use in the future. But of course, all this technology was taken away, which is why there's nothing but a void in the pyramid now. And in case you were wondering what was in these pyramids, Hollywood already exposed that for us. Hollywood is known to put the real in movies and fake in real life. This show is about explorers that went to Egypt and found lost treasure inside the pyramids.
Professor! I got it open! Great Scott, we've discovered the fountain of all knowledge of Egypt in the entire world. Do you realize the importance of this moment, Smedley?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you see the brilliance, the untold years?
I see it, sir.
Sir, this is medicine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
You slide.
Look! What is this? See, this is the elixir of life, sir.
The elixir of life?
The cure for all diseases.
Wait, let's see here.
Wait,
Give it to
the
me.
inscription on the bottom.
Give it to me. Give it.
Open at other end. This can't be, man.
What?
You know what this is?
What is it, Buna?
It's the book of life!
Things humans should never have seen. The ancient Egyptian lock. Grand Canyon has just been closed off and something huge has finally emerged. Turns out, the canyon might have been home to ancient Egyptians and even giants, and it was proven, only to be covered up. Yup, this one's about to take a turn no one was expecting. Scientists found this in Egypt, and IT can change everything. Egypt, a country known for its ancient secrets and incredible archaeological discoveries, has captivated people worldwide for hundreds of years. Its fascinating past and mysterious.
I felt so uncomfortable visiting Egypt, and I'm gonna tell you why. So scamming is a big issue here, and I didn't really know how big it was as a first timer. The Great Pyramids of Giza especially. Don't let anyone take a picture of you, don't let anyone put anything in your hands, and don't follow anyone if they have something to show you, because they will demand money from you. So we went with a tour guide, but don't even feel safe if you're with one, because ours had a lot of friends in this area, and they just kept offering us tons and tons of upgrades, like climbing this rock to get a picture with the background, and if you refuse to pay them, it can get kind of scary. Everyone says that you need to have a local or tour guide wherever you go. This itself is completely absurd because, for example, if you are a solo traveler, it kind of defeats the purpose of solo traveling. But then again, I definitely wouldn't recommend coming to Egypt alone, especially if you're a woman. That being said though, if you have a good tour guide, they will know what's real and fake when it comes to scamming, so for that you can trust them. But the hustling culture here is insane. Everywhere we went, it was non-stop begging for us to pay for something. If I'm being completely honest, I did not feel safe here, and being here made me so uncomfortable every day. When it comes to men, they do stare at you, and it's not even a normal stare, it's one of those really uncomfortable stares where they'll never take their eyes off of you. I was also really scared of losing our luggages as well. We had private drivers wherever we went, but whenever we got dropped off at a site and left our bags in the van, I was for sure I was never going to see them again. That being said, this was my experience being in Egypt, and even though the country itself is beautiful, just the people and the environment did not make me feel comfortable at all. So let me know what you guys think down below, or if you've had similar experiences like I did.
An old saying asserts that truth is stranger than fiction, and perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in ancient Egypt. Their civilization, dazzling yet disturbing, fashioned practices that would instill dread in modern hearts. Let's delve into these chilling aspects of their existence. Number 1. Mummification and the afterlife. Ancient Egypt was a civilization deeply obsessed with death and the afterlife, a fascination that gave rise to the eerie and intensive process of mummification. Considered a fundamental ritual for securing immortality, the procedure was elaborate and chilling, involving the removal of internal organs, preservation of the body, and an array of rites meant to guide and protect the soul on its journey to the afterlife. The mummification process began shortly after death. The body was first washed and purified before the embalmers began their gruesome work. A sharp instrument was inserted into the left nostril to remove the brain, which was often discarded as the Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the center of a person's being. The next step was the removal of internal organs, the intestines, the lungs, the stomach, and the liver, all taken out through a small cut in the left side of the body. These organs were preserved separately in canopic jars, intended to be reunited with the body in the afterlife. Mummification was not only reserved for humans, millions of animals regarded as sacred were also mummified. The catacombs of Egypt house countless mummified creatures, including cats, baboons, crocodiles, and birds, all intended to serve as divine messengers or as offerings to the gods. While we now regard mummification with a sense of morbidity and dread, for the ancient Egyptians, it was a profoundly sacred ritual, a guarantee of life after death. Their belief in resurrection and eternity resulted in a practice that seems terrifying to us, encapsulating our fear of death and the unknown. As we unravel more of ancient Egypt's uncanny customs, this sense of unease only deepens, reminding us of the chasm of years and beliefs that separates us from this remarkable civilization. Number 2. Pharaoh's death rituals. The death of a pharaoh in ancient Egypt was not merely an occasion for mourning. It was a mammoth event that set in motion a series of complex, prolonged, and, to our sensibilities, unnerving rituals. The grandeur of the pharaoh's status necessitated elaborate preparations for their journey to the afterlife. While some elements overlapped with mummification practices of the common folk, the death rites of a pharaoh were on a scale of extravagance and intricacy that would baffle the modern mind. Upon the pharaoh's demise, the body was promptly taken to the Ibu, or the place of purification, where embalmers performed the mummification process discussed earlier. However, the pharaoh's mummification was notably more elaborate, including special rituals and finer materials to reflect their divine status. The organs removed were stored in 4 distinct canopic jars, each guarded by one of the 4 sons of Horus, gods assigned with protecting the viscera of the deceased. The pharaoh's heart, believed to hold their wisdom and experiences, was left in place for the trials of the afterlife. More importantly, it played a pivotal role in the weighing of the heart ceremony, a test the pharaoh must pass to achieve eternal life. The fear and tension associated with this ceremony were intense, so much so that special spells were inscribed on the tomb walls to ensure the pharaoh's success. The most terrifying part of the pharaoh's death rites was perhaps the opening of the mouth ceremony. This ritual was believed to restore the mummy's senses, necessary for receiving offerings in the afterlife. Instruments were used to touch different parts of the mummy's face as spells were recited, metaphorically opening the senses and reviving the mummy in a spectral semblance of life. As part of the mourning process, the royal women were known to participate in an extreme display of grief, including tearing at their hair, scratching their faces, and howling in despair. It was a display that brought home the stark reality of death. The pharaoh's death rituals highlight the ancient Egyptians' obsession with death and the afterlife. Their belief in the afterlife was so strong, and the pharaoh's role in the cosmic order so integral, that they went to great lengths to ensure his successful transition into eternity, resulting in rituals that are as fascinating as they are terrifying. Number 3. Slavery and forced labor. In ancient Egypt, the concepts of slavery and forced labor took on a deeply unsettling form. While Egyptologists have debated the exact nature and extent of slavery in ancient Egypt, there is clear evidence of servitude and forced labor, especially in large state projects and domestic service. Slave labor was central to the construction of the monumental structures that ancient Egypt is famous for. The pyramids, temples, and royal tombs were built through the toil of vast numbers of workers. These laborers were not always slaves in the traditional sense, but were often conscripted from the Egyptian populace for corvée labor, a form of unpaid, forced labor for a certain period each year. Life for these laborers was arduous and fraught with hazards. They worked under the scorching Egyptian sun, executing strenuous tasks that included quarrying stone, hauling massive blocks, and crafting intricate decorations. Many laborers suffered from malnutrition, severe injuries, and diseases caused by the harsh working conditions. Despite the essential role these workers played in creating the iconic monuments of ancient Egypt, their lives were filled with hardship and suffering. Slavery also played a role in domestic settings, where slaves served as household servants, gardeners, cooks, and personal attendants. Many of these slaves were prisoners of war or people purchased from foreign slave markets. Their status was inherited, meaning the children of slaves also became slaves. The institution of slavery and forced labor in ancient Egypt presents a disturbing chapter in human history. The spectacular accomplishments of this civilization were, in part, built upon the suffering and exploitation of the vulnerable. As we marvel at the pyramids and temples, it is important to remember the countless lives that were worn away in their creation. The ghosts of these past injustices remind us of the grim realities that often lurk behind grandeur and glory, etching a chilling narrative of life and death in ancient Egypt.
Yes, hello, it's Spooky Lake Month, where we're doing 31 days of haunted hydrology. Today I want to talk about a pharaoh's tomb in Sudan that's flooded. The entrance to this 2,300-year-old resting place is underwater. Not many are familiar with the Black Pharaohs from the ancient kingdom of Nubia. Also called the Kingdom of Kush, they were influenced by the African peoples from the south and the Egyptian Empire to the north. For 100 years from 760 BC, 5 Kushite pharaohs actually ruled all of Egypt from Nubia to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nubians had similar burial practices to the Egyptians. They worshipped the same gods and they built pyramids in the desert alongside the Nile. However, the tombs differ from the Egyptians because they're buried in the earth beneath these small pyramids. However, there are twice as many pyramids here as what can be found in Egypt. When archaeologists were first unearthing this royal burial ground at Nuri, they realized that many of the pyramid tombs were inundated with water. It was coming from the Nile, percolating up through the ground. Because the groundwater will continuously replenish, traditional dirt excavation wasn't possible. Water discouraged looters from pilfering these tombs, so many of them remain untouched. Nestasim was a king of Kush near the end of the Nubian dynasty. They began to excavate his tomb in 2018. It took 2 years to dig out the ancient staircase cut into the bedrock, and it required special equipment and skill to enter the flooded tomb. There's only one way in and one way out, with the rock being held up by a makeshift doorway. Scuba tanks are too unwieldy in this claustrophobic environment, so they use a long tube for oxygen. There are 3 chambers in the tomb, with the ceiling being collapsed in the second. You have to maneuver over the pile. As archaeologists make their way through this tight, confined space, they're alone under the earth with the sarcophagus of a long-dead king. For now, the sarcophagus and the mummy inside remain untouched because it's too heavy to maneuver in this flooded chamber. Archaeologists have to make do with sifting through the murky waters to find artifacts in the sand. For disturbing the dead in their final resting place beneath the earth flooded by the Nile, 3 out of 10 spookies.
This thing, once a prisoner, still remembered his past in the Egyptian desert, where injustice and cruelty reigned. The ruthless guards had held him in a tiny metal cage where he could barely stand. The scorching sun beat down relentlessly on the arid ground, raising the temperature to unbearable heights. Every day was a struggle to survive in these extreme conditions. Water in a bucket was the only source of comfort, But even that was not guaranteed. The guards cruelly rationed water rations, leaving the prisoners to suffer from thirst and dehydration. The rest will surprise you.
I stayed at a one-star hotel in Egypt for a video and I ended up getting harassed. It was actually terrifying.
Oh my god. 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 No.
A group of men ended up following me around for the next 20 minutes, even though I was walking around in circles trying to lose them. I love being a girl. Anyway, this was a one-star hostel. It was definitely something. I thought these were hotel slippers they provided, but then I realized they belonged to the person who stayed in the room before me. A 3-in-1 bathroom, and the hotel room smelled really bad of cigarettes, and I realized that's because you can smoke inside. Quite a common thing in Europe, so it didn't take me too much by surprise, but the hotel room door didn't lock, so that put me on edge, and I ended up staying at a 5-star hotel instead, which I'm going to review on TikTok for you tomorrow. If you guys want to see that, make sure you're following me, or you can watch my YouTube video. The link is in my bio if you want to see the comparison between the 5-star and the 1-star hotel I stayed at.
After moving this creepy statue in my basement, something happened. I was doing an experiment attempting to uncover the veil when what looks like an Egyptian god of death made its appearance. After hearing a loud, breathy growl from this corner, I turned the eye camera towards it and snapped a pic. This is what I captured. This looks very similar to Anubis, god of the underworld. He's the one who would weigh your soul against the weight of a feather, and by his calculation, he determined where your soul went. So for tonight's live stream, I'll be experimenting to see if moving this statue really caused this Anubis-type manifestation to occur. Low end nightmares, we all had very vivid and intense sleep disturbances after the last stream. Members Only Mondays is about to start. Click to join the Live Now. Even if you're not a Sub-Squad member, you'll be able to access a live preview for up to 6 minutes. Thank you for that feature, TikTok.
Another scary story, and this one comes from Egypt. So my family and I went to visit Egypt during the summer. They own a couple of homes, my parents, and this one that we went to was in front of a river. My parents preferred this one and adored this house. The craziest things though would happen in this house, but my parents never believed us until one day they were left with no other choice but to come face to face with the house's darkest secret. We would always hear howling, crying, doors opening and closing, lights turning on and off and flickering, glass breaking, our names being called, things disappearing and reappearing like keys, and so on. One night, I was getting ready for bed right after the Fajr prayer. If I said that wrong, I'm so sorry. My sister was already in bed fast asleep, and as I was crawling into bed, I felt a very strong, icy presence behind me. So I turned around and what I saw looked like a young man with short dark hair, heavy eyebrows, and the darkest eyes I have ever seen. So he had this frown on his face and it seemed like he was watching me from the corner of the room. I froze in fear and he disappeared in thin air right in front of my eyes. I screamed so loud, waking my sister up. She yelled at me, "What's wrong with you?" I told her, "There is something in this room with us." Her eyes widened and she said, "Did you see him too?" I couldn't believe that she also saw him. We were both so shocked, we kept the lights on and then finally fell asleep. The next day, we told our parents and they just looked at each other and said, "Just ignore it. Don't give it any attention. Read the Ayatul Kursi." They didn't deny it this time though. Things started to escalate from there. 2 days later, my mom found what seemed to be some kind of witchcraft or voodoo on top of the china cabinet. It was tied in so many knots and it looked like it was animal's hair wrapped in a bag with oil in it. My parents then decided to get a sheikh, which is like Islamic scholar, and he blessed the house and read prayers over the family. But then things got worse. My mom decided to dig into the history of the house. Apparently, this home was previously used by a lady who was known to do witchcraft. She was so evil and feared by people that no one knew what had happened to her. It was almost as if she vanished and never reappeared again. My parents then decided to leave as they were so disturbed by this. The next day, we packed our bags, opened the front door, and right in front of the entrance of the door, there was this perfectly shaped pyramid pile of black sand. We were so puzzled by this odd placement of it. It was perfect, not even an uneven edge to it. My dad yelled, "Don't cross this, just walk around it." Me and my sister walked around and ran to the car and took off. My sister swears till this day that as we were leaving in the car, she saw a woman standing by the sand pile at the front door laughing at us. As for me, well, I see the young man in my dreams every now and then, and it feels like he's somehow still watching me. I hear my name also being called in a deep voice. So my parents never sold the house, but it's been kept abandoned since. Send me more, guys. These are so good.
3 crazy things you didn't know about ancient Egypt. Here are 3 of the most unsettling aspects of ancient Egyptian folklore. 1. The curse of the pharaohs. It's said that anyone who disturbs the tomb of a pharaoh is cursed with bad luck, illness, or death. This belief gained popularity after several members of Howard Carter's team, who opened King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, met untimely ends. 2. The Book of the Dead. This ancient Egyptian text wasn't a single book, but a collection of spells designed to guide the deceased through the underworld and into the afterlife. Some spells were written to ward off potential dangers in the underworld, including monstrous serpents and crocodiles. 3. The Cannibal Hymn. Found inscribed in the Pyramid of Pharaoh Yunus. This eerie text describes the pharaoh becoming a god, ascending to the sky, and devouring the gods and humans to absorb their power and ensure his immortality. Follow us for more bizarre history.
So back in the 20s and 30s, they was over there in Egypt, digging and looking for stuff and all that junk, right? And they messed around and came across these like drawings or hieroglyphs, whatever you want to call them, that showed like modern day stuff. Like it showed tanks, like modern at that time, back in they showed tanks, cause they had tanks and junk in World War One. It showed tanks, it showed like assault rifles and big rifle guns and stuff like that. I ain't talking about no bow and arrow, I ain't talking about no sword and shield. These pictures here showed all types of stuff that was like alien technology, like, or advanced technology, either way you want to look at it. Now, they say that they had a lot of the stuff, and when white folk came, and I ain't trying to beat up on the white folk, that's just who came. But when they came and when they conquered a lot of people, the people didn't share with them their technology. They was like, you can beat us up, you can kill us, you do whatever you want, but we ain't finna give you this technology, so because we already see what you doing now with what you got. So if we give you this over, we know you gonna take over every goddamn thing. So if you're looking at the drawings, you see that they ain't like, usually when you look at everything on here, it look like a blueprint. It look like a schematic or something. Everything is like square and digital looking. It don't look like how you usually see, hieroglyphs or whatever, man. All this stuff look like this. It look like something that if you take away the rock and put it on that blue paper like they had, like the engineers had, it'll look like plans to build, some modern military weaponry or something, man. So a lot of stuff they already had. They had over time, man. All these years they had the stuff. The only thing is, a lot of stuff didn't get shared because when folk got conquered, they wasn't finna share that. They just wasn't finna share that knowledge. They were gonna fight to the end.
So the worst story I ever heard from archaeology in Egypt. Warning, this is horrifying. This happened to an old professor of mine at Oxford. So she's out deep in the middle of the desert studying this ancient site, pitched up in a little tent that has its own bathroom thingy. And she wakes up one night because she has this itchy eye. She scratches it, but it's still itchy. She tries going back to sleep, but it's still itchy. So she heads to the bathroom mirror and turns on the light. And her eye is crawling with ants. Now she's freaking out, washing them off in the sink. And she goes to see her bed. And there's a gigantic line of ants leading from her pillow, down her bed, onto the floor, and out the door into the desert. Millions of them. Cause there's so little water there, a whole colony of ants had come to drink tiny little droplets of water from her eyeball.
I didn't think I believed in ghosts until something has happened that I cannot explain. I just got back from my 3rd trip to Egypt, and in Egypt there is a statue that is off limits to the general public. She is locked and you have to pay a lot of money for entry into this private temple where this statue is. This is the statue of the goddess Sekhmet. She is locked in a temple with pretty much pitch black with a tiny hole in the ceiling that allows a little bit of sunlight to come through. That is the only light source. When I entered the temple, some creepy stuff started to happen. When I walked into the chamber, I felt like somebody had cattle prod the back of my neck. I had such a huge electrical surge through my body that the hair on my legs and arms and everywhere was standing on end, and I got like instant pins and needles through my body. The statue is emitting large amounts of electromagnetic energy. Nowhere else in the room, just the statue. Here's where stuff gets really weird. Not only were we all experiencing like physical anomalies entering the temple with the statue in, but our cameras and electrical equipment were also freaking out. This photo was taken on an iPhone. When they attempted to take a photo of the statue with a flash, this is what happened. The screen completely whited out. These 2 photos were taken milliseconds apart, one with a flash, one without. The one with the flash went crazy and the one without was able to capture a photo. If you look at the geotag of the 2 photos taken milliseconds apart, they have completely different geotags. All of the photos that were able to complete have Karnak Temple as the geotag. The weird one that went crazy geotagged to the Nile. This is a professional photograph done by a photographer who had his camera that he's had since he was 16 years old. And this camera is particularly good at taking very clear photos in low light conditions. He absolutely freaked out when he discovered that he could not focus his camera on this statue. And this weird, like double exposed photo really baffled him. This photo was taken this week on the most recent tour. Now, at first, I didn't notice anything wrong with this photo. Right? It's just a person who's walking in front of the statue and it's got a bit blurry. Except that's not a person. The man took a photo of the statue with nobody in the room. This is not a person. Okay, here is an enhanced image. You can see that this is not a human that was in the room. Can someone explain what is going on?
Izar is a special female jinn that exists in West Africa. Though she is predominantly found in Egypt, Morocco, Yemen, Saudi Arabia and Sudan, she also exists in Somalia. She is known to be a man-hating jinn who possesses a married woman who has been mistreated in society and sometimes reduced to a second-class citizen. The jinn demands various things from the victim's husband, such as jewelry, clothes and money, in order for her to leave the body. If the husband doesn't follow the demands, they are punished in the worst form possible, which can sometimes result in death. Her belief is so strong in these parts of the world that people have come together to form an almost cult-like group called the Cult of Zar. In it, there is a dedicated shaman who employs a group of workers to carry out an all-female dancing ritual to expel the jinn from the body. Sometimes these rituals are also said to include the females within the victims' families, but women from all walks of life can participate in this ritual. The dancers wear silver and gold jewelry as well as lavish gifts to entice the jinn to leave, and she does after swinging madly and dancing in frenzy from receiving gifts and gold from everyone there.
Scariest Facts You Didn't Know, Part 2. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers.
The terrifying stories behind the Screaming Mummy. Found in the ancient Egyptian site of Deir el-Bahri, the Screaming Mummy is one of archaeology's most disturbing discoveries. Here's why. Rather than wrapped in linen, the Screaming Mummy was wrapped in sheep's skin, which the Egyptians regarded as unclean. His hands and his feet were also bound, as if he had perished as a prisoner. The Screaming Mummy has similar DNA markers and Y chromosomes to that of Pharaoh Ramesses III. Some speculate the Screaming Mummy was executed for trying to dethrone his father. A chemist who analyzed the body also suggested the man was perhaps entombed alive or hung. Though his coffin was unmarked, he was found near a number of royal coffins. During the 2011 Egyptian Revolution, many of the artifacts in the Museum of Cairo were stolen or destroyed. Some mummies were wrecked completely, but by mysterious chance, looters left the Screaming Mummy alone.
Scientists and historians cannot explain this unbelievably scary discovery in Egypt. The city of Tanis was once the capital of Egypt over 3,000 years ago, before that title was handed over to Memphis. However, the civilization and everyone who lived there mysteriously vanished. In the early 1900s, researchers found the city, but it was in shambles. It was as if a literal bomb had been set off in the city's center. Experts haven't agreed on an explanation for this, but believe it or not, the story of the destruction of Tanis is actually explained in the Bible. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 30, God said, "I will destroy the idols and put an end to the images in Memphis. No longer will there be a prince in Egypt, and I will spread fear throughout the land. I will lay waste to Upper Egypt, set fire to Zoan, also known as Tanis, and inflict punishment on Thebes." And that final note is the scariest part of all, because the statues that were found in Tanis were burnt by fire. Follow for more creepy true stories.
This is a true horrifying story of a man. These are the most haunted places.
Weird stuff that happens around the Sekhmet statue in Egypt. This is part 2 of me trying to explain the weird anomalies that happen when I visited a out-of-bounds statue in Egypt, because not only was there some pretty visceral, weird experiences, but also our cameras kept freaking out. And wait till you see the pictures. So where was I? This is a professional photograph done by a photographer who had his camera that he's had since he was 16 years old. And this camera is particularly good at taking very clear photos in low light conditions. He absolutely freaked out when he discovered that he could not focus his camera on this statue, and this weird like double exposed photo really baffled him, and he sent this photo off to his team back in Saudi Arabia to say, is there an issue with the camera? Is this a double exposed photograph of like 2 photos over another? Is his camera broken? What's going on? So the camera forensic people got back to him and said, no, this photo is not motion blur and it is not double exposed. This is some weird, this is what the camera captured when it was trying to focus on the statue and couldn't. For reference, here is a photo taken in another similar chamber with similar lighting. Same camera in the same temple complex, similar lighting thing. This is the kind of photo that you should be able to take, and the other one was his camera freaking out. Now for reference, this is a straight on photo of Sekhmet, right? Here it is, here she is. It's very, very low light. The only light source is a tiny hole in the temple ceiling, which gives us a little bit of sunlight. Okay, so the photos before were taken on my last tour in September 2022. This photo was taken this week on the most recent tour, also taken by a professional photographer with his camera. Now at first, I didn't notice anything wrong with this photo, right? It's just a person who's walking in front of the statue and it's got a bit blurry. Except that's not a person. The man took a photo of the statue with nobody in the room. This is not a person. This is nobody on the tour. Okay, here is an enhanced image of the photograph before, and you can see that this is not like a solid purple. This was not a human that was in the room. Nobody on the tour was wearing a hat. Nobody was wearing a kind of coat like that. This is not a reflection of anybody. It's not a reflection of the statue, because I don't see how that matches or would even do that. Oh, can someone explain what is going on? Now, I didn't believe in ghosts. I've never personally experienced like a ghostly supernatural experience, so I had no frame of reference. However, one of the Egyptologists that was on the group, when she saw this photo, she pointed out that this weird person here looks a hell of a lot like this Egyptian dude. Like, it's the same clothes, it's the same hat. What? I didn't think I believed in ghosts until something has happened that I've experienced that I cannot explain. Okay, story time. I've just got back from my 3rd trip to Egypt, and in Egypt there is a statue that is off limits to the general public. She is locked, and you have to pay a lot of special permission money for entry into this private temple where this statue is. So this is the statue of the goddess Sekhmet. She is locked in a temple with pretty much pitch black, with a tiny hole in the ceiling that allows a little bit of sunlight to come through. That is the only light source, that is the only electrical anything in the building. So long story short, when I first met Sekhmet last year, when I entered the temple, some creepy stuff started to happen. I've done a whole YouTube video documenting exactly what went down with the whole group of us. However, in a nutshell, when I walked into the room, into the chamber, I felt like somebody had cattle prod the back of my neck. I had such a huge electrical surge through my body that the hair on my legs and arms and everywhere was standing on end, and I got like instant pins and needles through my body, which I'd never experienced before. So since last year, one of the members of the tour had the funding to send back equipment to test for electromagnetic activity. And turns out, yeah, the statue is emitting large amounts of electromagnetic energy. Nowhere else in the room, just the statue. And like I said before, there is no electrical equipment in the building. There is nothing. A lot of places in Egypt have put modern lighting in for the tourists, but this is not a tourist area. It doesn't have anything of that kind. This is the statue. Okay, now here's where stuff gets really weird. Not only were we all experiencing like physical anomalies entering the temple with the statue in, but our cameras and electrical equipment were also freaking out. For example, this photo was taken on an iPhone, and when they attempted to take a photo of the statue with a flash, this is what happened. The screen completely whited out. Now, this is only supposed to happen if you literally shine like a flood lamp torch into an iPhone camera. So these two photos were taken milliseconds apart, one with a flash, one without. The one with the flash went crazy, and the one without was able to capture a photo. Now, I noticed afterwards, if you look at the geotag of the two photos taken milliseconds apart, they have completely different geotags. All of the photos that were able to complete have Karnak Temple as the geotag, and the weird one that went crazy, geotagged to the Nile. Now, it wasn't just the iPhone cameras that were freaking out. This photo is from a professional photographer's camera, and I'm gonna have to do a part 2 because wait until you see what came out on the professional photographer's camera. We cannot explain it.
Do you like your sandwiches with a side of mummy? Welcome to part 1 of Scary Stories from Ancient Egypt. In the 1800s, mummies were the it thing in Europe. Many people used to smuggle them into the country and then have parties to unravel them. But not only that, mummy wrappings became a popular way to wrap food and is a suspected cause of cholera. August Sandwood was an American paper merchant who imported mummies to make rag paper, but of course they were too stained. Maybe it's because they were wrapped up in a dead body for thousands of years. So he sold the paper to butchers and street merchants so they'd have something to wrap their food in. Like, imagine wrapping your shawarma in your dead aunt's scarf. Anyways, an outbreak of cholera was traced back to him, so he shut down the process immediately. Like and follow for part 2.
Bastet is the cat goddess of Egyptian mythology. She is represented as a being with a woman's body and a cat's head. Cats were honored animals and considered sacred by the Egyptians. Cats played an important role in the Egyptian world, as the animals protected people's food from rodent infestations. And cats also scared off dangerous, poisonous snakes. Bastet is a goddess connected with the sun. Therefore, during the day, the goddess followed Ra on his journeys across the sky in his solar boat. During the night, the goddess took the form of a full cat, and she protected the world against the terrible serpent Apophis. The goddess was worshipped throughout Egypt.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Strange. Want to hear something scary? Sometimes life can imitate art, but if it gets too close, things can go very wrong, as in this tale inspired by Michaela and based on a true story. Despite horror movies being extremely rare in Egypt, Yassine, an inspiring director, felt like he had the perfect script. The story was simple. After the death of his only daughter, a grief-stricken doctor leaves his family home and moves into an old mansion only to experience some violent hauntings. So he calls a spiritualist to investigate. Yassine had cast a real-life spiritualist for the role who had expert knowledge of the paranormal. Saeed El-Husseini Al-Fayek was well known for specializing in black magic. Yassine encouraged him to act as he typically would during an investigation. When they were shooting the exorcism scene, the crew watched in awe as the spiritualist recited a powerful incantation. The spiritualist read Al-Tizar Al-Bar Hatya, written in an ancient language and needed to be chanted at a very specific pace. In addition, the precise pronunciation of each word was required in order to banish jinns. As Al-Fayek ended the monologue, the crew cheered. Less than 10 people in the world could perform it correctly, as it takes many years to master. Any small mistake could be catastrophic, since it was believed that no spirit could disobey a summoning incantation. Once performed, the words opened the door for the spirit realm, allowing entry to the human world. Yassine was thrilled with the performance and asked a cinematographer to check the footage. But as they began to watch, they were baffled to discover most of the footage was distorted. When the scene with Al-Fayek's big moment began to play, the cameraman looked in horror. "Sir," he mumbled, "who are these people?" His fingers shook as he pointed towards the screen. Yassine stared at the screen in disbelief. There were shadows of people in the footage who had not been on the set. The director insisted it was probably just something on that reel, but the cinematographer knew it wasn't his fault. The spirits were glaring back at them, and the distortion appeared only on that reel with the incantation scene. However, time was short and they decided to wrap up the production as quickly as possible. The movie was released and tickets for the premiere sold out fast, as Egyptian citizens were eager to get a taste of the rare homegrown horror movie. Yassine sat in a packed audience enjoying the fruits of his labor. When the incantation scene took place, a woman began screaming and crying. As people rushed to help her, others began to vomit, unable to control themselves. Some claimed they felt cold hands touching them, and others left the theater out of fear that something else other than just a movie was going on. And this wasn't a one-off incident. This happened all over the country whenever the film was being screened. One theater even burned down with no explainable source of the fire. That was enough for authorities to pull the movie. Yassine was devastated. The cinematographer was certain it was the incantation, and after close inspection, Yassine discovered the spiritualist's horrific act of deceit. Al-Fayek had purposely recited the exact words, not to exorcise the jinn as instructed, but to open a portal. The crew was terrified. Egyptian culture is very strict about black magic. It was not to be messed with, and those who use it to hurt others will become servants of the devil. Yasin desperately tried to find Al-Fayak to retract the spell, but he seemed to have disappeared. Years later, Yasin received a strange phone call. Al-Fayak's wife had found him laying on his back on the floor of his office, his face blue as though he had been suffocated. His jaw was cracked open, and there was black tears running down his cheeks. His eyes were as wide as dinner plates staring at the ceiling, and above him was a dark stain that looked like a burn mark. When the police arrived, they discovered many handkerchiefs stained with blood and copious amounts of milk, both things synonymous with black magic. And there were hundreds of photos of celebrities with strange incantations and spells written on the back, including one of Yasin from their time on set. There was no logical explanation for his death. His autopsy showed no signs of physical trauma, poisoning, or even cardiac arrest. The case was closed quickly. No one wanted to return to the scene. It seemed Al-Fayak had truly become a servant of the devil, seduced by riches and infamy.
On June 9, 2023, a 23-year-old Russian man named Vladimir Popov was at a beach with his father Yuri at a place called Hurghada, which is in Egypt on the Red Sea. The two had reportedly moved there a few months prior to avoid the possibility that Vladimir might get drafted and have to go fight in the war against Ukraine. This decision, however, would lead to a fate that was arguably much more terrifying than having to go fight in a war. On that day, on the 9th, it was very overcast, but the weather was warm and the water was perfect. It was flat, it was clear, and it was nice enough that at some point Vladimir decided he was going to go for a swim and cool off. His father decided not to join him. So Vladimir goes out, and he was far from the only one in the water. There were dozens of people in the water, but he did swim out a little bit further than the rest of the beachgoers. He was about 50 meters from shore, that's about 165 feet, and he was about 20 meters off from this jetty that goes out into the water. 20 meters is about 65 feet. And as he was swimming around, at some point, he would have heard the sound of people screaming at him. We know this because on CCTV footage or security footage, we can see him stop and start looking around. Now, he may not have known what they were screaming, but what the people on the beach and on the jetty were screaming was, "Get out of the water, shark," because they could see the fin of a 3-meter long or 10-foot long tiger shark going directly for Vladimir. Now, he at some point did turn and see this fin and began to try to swim to shore, but by that time it was already too late and the thing was on top of him. It went under the water and grabbed him, and we don't know where it grabbed him by. It could have been the torso or the thigh or even the lower arm. You can't see that, but it starts pushing him through the water and just thrashing him around and pulling him under repeatedly. Now, at this point, after it strikes him, people on the beach immediately pull out their phones. There's several different videos of this, different angles, but the most famous one starts, and he's already been attacked. There's blood just surrounding him all over, just saturating the water around him. He's not screaming at this point, but that's probably because he's being drugged under repeatedly, so he's probably trying to catch his breath. And this goes on for 20 seconds that this shark just mauls him viciously. At one point, it flips him completely upside down, so his body is completely under the water, but his legs are just sticking up in the air vertically, and it's just thrashing him all over the place. It's the most violent shark attack I personally have ever seen, and I don't recommend that you watch the video if you haven't seen it. But after about 20 seconds, the shark lets him go, and this is when, tragically, you hear him start to scream. His head is above water. He's not moving very much, but he's screaming for his father. He's screaming, "Papa, Papa, save me." And you can hear this clearly, and people on the beach are screaming. There's music in the background, but even over that, you can hear him screaming for his father to please come save him. but the shark did not let him go for very long. It was about 8 seconds, and the shark goes behind him and circles around, and then from Vladimir's left side, your right side as you're looking at the video, but from his left side looking into the beach, it comes up out of the water and grabs him by what looks to be like his neck shoulder area. And it keeps him on the surface for about another 8 or 9 seconds as Vladimir is still screaming, and it's thrashing him around before it forces him under the water. The tailed shark comes up out of the water, and the tail just starts violently thrashing back and forth. So you know that it was using its head to just kind of rip him apart underwater. Now, his father, Yuri, is obviously watching this from the shore, unable to do anything. And so is everybody else filming, but there's people who got on boats as soon as this attack started, and they started making their way over to him. But again, this was about a minute-long attack, and by the time the boat pulls up right next to him, it is just as that shark's tail is thrashing, and it takes him under the water, and you don't see Vladimir again. Now, the shark stayed in the area for the next 2 hours, kind of playing with the body and consuming parts of Vladimir, and they were able to get fishermen out there, and they actually caught this thing with nets, and they brought it into shore. They beat it to death with pipes and crowbars and pieces of wood. Reports initially said that Yuri, his father, participated in this. However, this was not verified, so it's probably just media trying to kind of make the case more exciting. But anyways, these people took revenge on this thing. They beat it to death. They did a necropsy on it, where inside the shark they found Vladimir's head, portions of his limbs, his hand, portions of his torso, most of him. And the rest of him, authorities were able to recover. At least most of the rest of them they were able to recover from the water. He was cremated, and his remains were sent back to Russia. The shark, in true Egyptian fashion, was mummified, or is in the process of being mummified, and it will be on display in a museum there in Egypt.
One of the most feared creatures of Egyptian mythology is Ammit, the devourer of the dead. It was a hybrid of different animals, with the front paws of a lion, the hind paws of a hippopotamus, and a crocodile head crowned by a lion's mane. Ammit stood next to the scales of fate, waiting for Anubis to weigh the hearts of those who perished. When the heart was heavier than the feather of Ma'at, it meant that it was impure and was devoured by Ammit. Therefore, the soul of the bearer could not prolong its existence. Ammit symbolized the fairness of the afterlife, where everyone, whether rich or poor, good or bad, would have the chance to be judged as equals at the end of their lives. The fear the Egyptians had of Ammit helped guide people on the path of honesty.
H.P. Lovecraft never really liked anyone with skin darker than his own, but for his next creation he went black and never went back, giving us the ultimate badass Egyptian entity known as Nyarlathotep. This skinny legend is tall, dark, and fucking terrifying as a malign deity found in the Cthulhu mythos, and weaves a seductive spell of madness around mere mortals who encounter him. He can take on many forms, from a looming shadow of dread, to the smooth-ass player known as the Pharaoh, usually tricking his opponents into bad decisions that cost them their sanity, or their lives. But despite his cool-as-fuck attitude, he can go full batshit monster for anyone that wants a piece. Ultimately, Nyarlathotep serves the darkest of the gods in the cosmos, with the goal of bringing chaos and destruction to the world. So don't hate the player, hate the fact that he owns your soul from the minute he lays his glowing eyes on you. Peace out, you little miscreants, and hope that Nyarlathotep never whispers into your sleeping ears. Like and follow for more.
The Egyptian authorities won't tell you they discovered the last phoenix, the mythical bird, deep within the hidden chambers of the Great Pyramid of Giza. In the 1990s, the authorities launched confidential excavations. They constructed a vast underground sanctum hidden beneath the pyramid's base. This private sanctum was codenamed Zone P. Their purpose was to study mythical creatures that were believed to be mere legends. All this astounding revelation came to light when archaeologist and researcher Brock Lee from Cairo disclosed it just months ago on August 5th. Brock Lee was investigating investigating the inner chambers of the pyramid. While navigating, Brock discovered a concealed underground passage, a grand gateway leading deeper into the pyramid. Upon entering, he was enclosed by the stone walls of an immense underground sanctum. Equipped with a torch, Brock Lee ventured inside. As he delved deeper, the magnitude of the sanctum astounded him. On one of the walls, he found an engraving, Zone P, property of the Egyptian authorities, forbidden access. The sanctum had observation windows offering a restricted view. As he approached one, a melodious song resonated from the depths. He was nearly 300 feet below the pyramid's base, and proceeding further seemed dangerous. Looking through the window, he was astonished. A beaming bird with fire playing around its outline, this magnificent creature was the Phoenix, reborn from its ashes. Brock Lee quickly captured footage with his camera. He uploaded the clip online, and it became an overnight internet sensation.